What's up, everybody? Thrall's Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have yet another collection update for you. Again, got a giant bundle of stuff. Have some stuff sent to me by an awesome subscriber, Ben NG. Sent me a stack of interesting stuff. Also, I think this is the last of the stuff that I picked up with all the gift cards that I got for Christmas, because literally I just asked everyone, if you want to give me something, give me an Amazon gift card, and a lot of people obliged, which was really cool. And there's a fair amount of double dipping on this one, as in I got two releases by the same band, so we're going to go through a lot of fucking music once again, because that's how these things generally roll, so I'm just going to get right into this. Demoncy, Joined in Darkness. This is the second album from this then North Carolina, then they moved to Georgia, and then I think they're in Seattle now. Anyway, they move around a lot, and by they, I think it's just one dude. At least, essentially, that's the only person I found that was consistent through every release, and I think a lot of this is just sort of done in-house with the one dude, and then you got, session musicians to play with them in terms of live performances. Anyway, this is some one-man black metal, and this is maybe a little bit different than, I suppose, what I expected in terms of one-man black metal. First off, there is a long, kind of pointless intro, but when you get down to the music, this has more of like a blackened death metal feel, at least as far as the guitars. They're very deep and very sludgy. Like, you don't get that crispy, gainy, cold sound on the guitars at all. You definitely get them on the vocals. They're very ghastly, very ominous sounding. But the guitars, again, sludgy, deep, drony, maybe a little bit robotic. This pretty much dry humps a tremolo riff and kind of the same picking on, like, every song, because I think every song involves a tremolo riff and, pretty much just going for the atmospheric sound. Now, the one person that's, constantly involved in this, Ixithra, I think that's how you say that. He is a former member of Profanatica, or at least like a one-time member, and a lot of this is very similar to Profanatica. Now, this as a drum machine, it is pretty damn obvious, but it kind of sits back in the mix, so it's not like one of those where it's just obnoxiously loud or anything like that. But my issue with the music is it is very robotic. Like, the riffs are very indistinct. You do have some more like almost death doomy moments on Winter Bliss and Hypocrisy of the Accursed Heavens. And you do have some surprisingly catchy melodies on Angel of Dark Shadows, Goddess of the Dark. But a lot of this kind of just drones on, really just stays in its own lane, and it really doesn't deviate much, which makes this kind of a static listen. Outside of like the very occasional breakdown, like on Hidden Path to the Forest Beyond, this is just kind of like very minimalistic, and I think it's more driven by the atmosphere than anything else, because this kind of just drones on. I don't think it's necessarily bad, it's just really not my thing, because I like riffier black metal and like a little bit more dynamic in the sound. Like, this is just very static and very atmospheric and very drony, and I don't know, I kind of really didn't get into it. Still, I urge you to check it out and find out on your own if you actually like this. This really wasn't for me. I guess I would say it's pretty comparable to Profanatica, so if you like Profanatica, you might find some stuff in here you really dig. It does have some similarities there, albeit probably a little bit more raw, which Profanatica is already pretty fucking raw to begin with. This was kind of so-so for me, but who knows, you might really dig it, so check it out. Exploator, Avgrundens Brant. This is the debut full-length from this Czech Republic D-beat/crust band. This is also stuff that Ben sent me, and I had never heard of this band. This is my first exposure, and I fucking love it. This is just straight-up Discharge worship, and it's awesome. It's just D-beats, some fucking furious riffs that kind of border on thrash, definitely a fuck ton of punk, because this is crust punk after all. And this album is essentially just no bullshit about it fucking crust punk. Like, there isn't anything extra on here other than the bare bones of it, and honestly, that is something I absolutely loved about it. Every song is just a gut punch, and I love crust punk. I love D-beat. This is really fucking well done. I like the production on it. It's fucking gnarly sounding. The vocals are fucking larynx shredding. This dude sounds exhausted, like he jogged around outside in the fucking winter while smoking fucking menthol cigarettes. And that's before every vocal take, because, dude, they sound like they're giving it their all. This just sounds like music to destroy things to, and it's fucking perfect. Now, I would love to tell you some of the song names, but they are difficult to pronounce, because I don't think any of them are in English. Like, there's some ones that are maybe a little bit easier just because it looks like the root words are still about the same, like Direct Reaction, except they spelled direct reaction with K's in it. But I know that's a badass song, but honestly, I think all these songs were just badass because they all kind of just stick to the crust punk formula. You have some moments of groove in here. You do have like some thrashier sections, but most of it is just straight up D-beat and just, I don't know, filthy aggression. Every song explodes out of the gate. It doesn't waste any time getting to all the important parts. It's just fucking awesome. I'd say the only points where it really broke out of the D-beat format was the songs Gren's Lost Tom and Ford Backum Legisit. I fucking probably did not do well on either one of those. But either way, those songs have maybe like a little bit more groove or they slowed down just a little bit. But honestly, it's about the peaked energy in here. It's all fucking fun. I really dug this. I definitely want to check out more by this band. I don't know if they have much more outside of this release, but I'm definitely a fan. This was fucking awesome. If you love D-beat crust, if you love Discharge and Dysphere and tons of other crust punk bands that have dis at the beginning of it, definitely check this out. This is fucking awesome. Lampir, or Lampir, I'm not entirely sure. The Alchemy of Cursed Blood. This is their debut album, or rather his. This is another one-man black metal project based out of the US, which is a large territory, but I couldn't figure out where this dude was from. Actually, any information on this band seemed very minimal in terms of like just finding any sort of background. So this band's a little bit of a mystery, and I really should have wrote down the track names because they didn't put any on the back. But we're going to kind of wing it on there because I only did the Cliff Notes version of them because some of the song titles were long. But this is very just raw, cold, ugly fucking black metal. I would say this definitely takes its cues from like Transylvanian Hunger era Dark Throne, like very static blast beats, lots of cold tremolos. The production is about as raw as it gets. It sounds like it was recorded on a tape deck inside of a storage unit. Like this is as cold as possible, I think. And I'm not really super into that style of black metal. Like, again, I like my black metal a little bit more riffy and with some minimal production value. Like, you know, just make it sound at least semi-decent. You can still make it sound raw and fucking nasty and still make it sound good. This just sounds raw and nasty. Now, that being said, there are some really good melodies on here. Some very catchy, almost sort of folky melodies on here. I think the drums are real, though it does kind of just sound like a static clatter because it's more of just a straightforward static blast beat. And I think it's a single kick drum too, so you don't get a lot of like additional like double bass flurries on there to kind of like, you know, do a double time section. Like a lot of this just holds on to the blast. There are some cool sections of groove on here. Again, I didn't write down the full tracks, but I think it's the one that involved the word emanation. But that has like a really cool, like kind of groovy breakdown, a little bit riffier. I mean, it still has all the cold atmosphere you could ever fucking want. But I don't know, it's a little bit nice to hear it break out of the usual thing that this album is doing, which is blasting and tremolos. Most of my issues with this, though, come from the production because the production's so raw. There are sections on here where I'm not entirely sure, but it sounds like there's either like a cowbell or a dog barking in the background. And I don't know, like it completely threw me off to the point where I kept fixating on that noise, trying to figure out what the fuck it was. But honestly, musically, this was pretty decent. You know, I think, again, with like some, you know, different production value, I know that's not the thing for more raw atmospheric black metal like this, but maybe with like just a little bit more production value, I think a lot of these songs might actually stand out a bit more. This is decent though. And honestly, raw black metal really isn't much my thing. Like occasionally there's some releases out there that really grab me, but this is all right. So pretty much if you like your black metal essentially frostbitten and just raw as hell, definitely check this out. It's kind of, again, in the vein of Transylvanian Hunger, like kind of stuff like that. If you dig that, I'm not the biggest fan of that era of Dark Throne. I know that's still like a semi-hot take with me, but it's just really not my thing. But still, urge you to check this out. There's some decent stuff on here. Again, production value kind of hinders it for me, but yeah, still pretty decent, so check it out. Putrid Pile, Revel in Lunacy. This is the 6th album from this one-man wrecking crew of brutal death metal from Wisconsin. I actually missed my chance at seeing them play at MDF, or rather him, Sean LeCain. I think that's how you say his last name, maybe. I don't know, I probably fucked it up. Anyway, this is a band I've kind of avoided just because of, like, I don't know about, like, one-man brutal death metal. And I've seen his live performances. The dude can fucking write riffs. Like, this guy has fucking riff writing chops for sure. But I wasn't really sure about the whole, like, one-man brutal death metal thing. And then I listened to this album, and honestly, this is really good. This is very tight, very fucking riffy. Like, there are riffs aplenty, great fucking breakdowns. Now, of course, all the drums are programmed, but honestly, it's a pretty decent program. The drums have a good punch to it. Musically, very akin to Dying Fetus and Aborted. But I was kind of surprised at some of the songwriting here. Like, there's elements of grindcore on here. There's even some, like, cold blackened tremolos in sections. The vocal variety is really good. He's got a good high-low flip. But this just packs riffs and brutality and just primal songwriting, and I ended up fucking really digging this. Much like black metal, I'm kind of picky when it comes down to brutal death metal as well, but this just sort of like packs a fun nature to it, and again, the songs are surprisingly catchy. Like, Gore and More, Devilish is an absolutely badass song. Half Ghoul, Starving for Your Blood. The song Savage Lust for Blood is thrashy as hell. I love the chugs on it, and again, very catchy. And these song titles are hilarious, but the one that really stood out to me was the song Cunt Kebab, which I'm sure pairs well with Sanguisugabog's Dick Fillet. That sounds like a very classy entree for fucking deviant brutal death metal fans out there. But yeah, this was fucking awesome. I really enjoyed this. I really wasn't sure about this one because, you know, I've heard some Putrid in the past and I thought it was okay, and the dude's always got riff writing chops. But this one, I don't know, like, it's just really well done for what it is. Like, it's catchy. It kind of has one gear, but it kind of surprises you every now and then, and I like that. Like, it kind of jumped outside of the formula just a bit to add some different flavors, and this was just a fun fucking release. So yeah, if you've never checked out Putrid Pile, this is the only one I own, and I really liked it, so this is probably going to be the one I'd recommend. But yeah, check this out. This is a fucking really good album. Kill Division, Peace Through Tyranny. This is the debut full-length from this death grind supergroup. This features Jeremy Kling of Inhuman Condition and The Absence, Kyle Simmons, formerly of Malevolent Creation and Hate Plow, Dirk Verburen, formerly of Soilwork, currently in Megadeth, and Gus Rios, formerly of Malevolent Creation and current Gruesome drummer. Now, all of these guys, except for Kyle, are drummers, which I thought was really fascinating, but of course only one of them plays drums, and it's Dirk on drums on here. Gus is playing guitars, and Jeremy is playing bass, and Kyle is doing vocals, and this is a straight up fucking Terrorizer tribute. Like, at least musically, that's what I got. This sounds like Terrorizer circa World Downfall, which honestly I could use a little bit of that since Terrorizer broke up, I guess, last year, but made it official this year. This is just fucking grindy fun. The songs are very punky, very just angry, in-your-face, explosive, good balance of just flat-out grind parts and fucking, you know, just straight-up death metal sections on here. But you also have, like, good thrashy, groovy sections, namely on songs like Thin the Herd, Cultists, and Battle-Scarred Creation. This pretty much packs, like, all the ferocity, again, of bands like Terrorizer, I would say early Napalm Death, and even Misery Index on here. The drum production is very raw, like, generally, I'm used to hearing Dirk with more, you know, like, polished production because he's in some bigger bands. These drums sound raw as fuck, as well as the rest of the album, but it's well mixed, well balanced out. The vocals are fucking furious. And as serious as the songs are fun. Like, they actually throw in some samples from the Transformers movies, which I thought was pretty hilarious. And I think mostly they just stuck with the first one because most of Michael Bay's Transformers movies are trash outside of the first one. Pretty much Michael Bay sucks. If he can't blow something up in a movie, he doesn't know what to do because certainly doesn't know how to move a fucking plot along or write any fucking dialogue, that's for damn sure. But this is pretty fun, and again, like, very Terrorizer-ish. I mean, to add further transparency, they covered Barely Alive on here as the last track. It's good. Maybe like a little by the numbers at times, but overall, it's the intensity and the fucking fun that really drove it, and I really ended up digging this. So if you're a grindcore fan, if you love Terrorizer, Napalm Death, I'd say Misery Index too, definitely check this out. This was just a fucking ripping album. So yeah, good stuff. Vomit Spell, Demo 2019. This is their 2019 demo. German death grind act. I actually have their first release. This came out as like a demo series on FDA Records a while ago, and I just never got around to picking it up. I actually got their full length first, and I just wanted to check out what their early stuff sounded like. And yeah, no, it's death grind. It's fucking vicious, gnarly, kind of roughly produced death grind, but I don't know, I kind of enjoy it. There's some interesting things this band does in terms of like their death grind sound. It's more atmospheric, and the extremes in terms of like dynamic shifts can be really interesting. Like this is, again, full bore, like Terrorizer. I would even say Repulsion, just in terms of how just raw it is. But it also has the darker atmosphere and, you know, occasional like nasty fucking breakdowns of a band like Incantation. So yeah, imagine all those bands wrapped up together in one disgusting blob of eyes, teeth, and pus and Satan, and yeah, you'll have this band. I would say that the full length definitely has more of a death metal vibe, like there's more distinct death metal sections. This almost kind of just goes more for the atmosphere. I would say the vocals are almost like a little bit more blackened on here. But it's these interesting like dynamic shifts, like going from like full bore blasts and fucking shrieked vocals and like very distant riffs to like Death Doom breakdowns on Misguided by Hatred and Monastery of Infamy. And Monastery of Infamy is a little bit different in the sense that it's a little bit groovier of a track. So is Transfiguration, the last track, which is almost entirely just groove-laden. Like, there's some sections that get a little bit faster, but there's some more distinct groovy sections. The song Dead End is, I would say, mostly crust punk and D-beat oriented, albeit played through like a death grind filter. This is pretty fucking disgusting. I think the production on it is maybe a bit much at times. Like, it's just very noisy and it's kind of hard to make out certain things in here. Like, sometimes the riffs can be a little bit indistinct, but overall this is pretty decent. I definitely think it's different than the full length. It's, again, like less purely death metal oriented. This is definitely a little bit more chaotic, a little bit more unhinged, but I don't know, I kind of like the focus a little bit more on the full length. Either way, check this out. This is raw, gross fucking death grind with heaping amounts of dissonance and just atmosphere, and it's just fucking filthy sounding. So yeah, if you like your death grind sounding more like Repulsion and, you know, Incantation mixed up together, this is pretty close to that. So yeah, check it out. Viogression, third stage of Decay. This is the second album from this Milwaukee-based death metal act and first album in 30 years from these guys. I had heard about them. I had never actually checked out their debut, but I remember Rick over the Dreadful Minutes really talking about this one a lot and saying like, dude, this was really fucking good. So I decided to snag it. And Rick, you were fucking right. This is much different than what I was expecting. I would say this is very comparable to like early Mortis Gold, but this band has a lot of fun with songwriting and dynamics and atmosphere. There are interesting synths pockmarked on here, really cool build-ups. Like the first track has like a marching snare sort of like build up to it over these like symphonic elements, which I really wasn't expecting symphonic elements, but it explodes into just violent, fucking heavy, kind of thrashy death metal. The vocals on here are very John Tardy-esque, like they're very ghastly, and he kind of takes the time to add a lot of extra to everything, and I fucking love that. The songwriting here, I think, is really wild. Like, you have, you know, all the tropes you love about old school death metal, very riffy, lots of groove, but you also have like a lot of clean melodies. It's not quite like progressive, but I feel like there's more attention to detail in these songs. Again, I haven't listened to their debut album, so I don't have that as a comparison, but I definitely want to check it out after checking out this one. But the riff work in here is exceptional. The song Under the Riverbed, great crawling riffs, really cool bass line to it. The bass actually really stands out in here. But I think one of the big ones for me was Caliginous Conflagration. That song has some absolutely amazing riff work in there. Great fucking songwriting. Like, it's just catchy all the way through, very intense. But the thing that kind of caught me off guard were clean vocals on here, which I totally was not expecting. The song From Dust and Sisters of Iris / Torian, those have clean vocals on it, as well as clean guitars. And for a band that I would assume is mostly known for just being flat out brutal as hell, again, I haven't listened to that debut, that is kind of bold, and the clean vocals are done really well, as well as the clean melodies. This album had a lot of cool surprises I wasn't expecting. I was pretty much expecting just straightforward old school death metal. I mean, this band's roots are in the fucking 90s, but there's a lot more to this. This is a really fucking engaging listen with a lot of really interesting songwriting, and I think this is awesome. So once again, I missed another cool one from last year. That's kind of a theme of these early collection updates in the year. But this was absolutely fantastic. I strongly recommend checking this one out. I am going to eventually just get that debut. I know they reissued it not too long ago. So I can kind of complete this one. Hell, maybe even do a full-on retro review of these guys, because I have a feeling that wouldn't be pretty interesting. Granted, we have a lot of stuff on that list, but I think it'll be fun. Either way, if you have not checked this one out, much like I didn't check it out last year, this is fucking awesome death metal. Again, if you like bands like Mortis Skuld, Obituary, but also, again, like some really fun, creative songwriting, definitely check this out. It's really fucking good. Wolftooth. This is their self-titled debut from 2018. This is an Indiana-based heavy metal / doom metal act. I actually got a chance to see them with Crowbar and Spirit Adrift last year, and they were absolutely amazing live. And I totally forgot that I didn't own this debut. Now, granted, this isn't the original. This is the 2019 reissue on Ripple Music, but I wanted it either way because, well, everything that this band has put out has been fucking awesome. This sounds very similar to a band like The Sword. Lots of, heavy, doomy riffs. I mean, the riffs on this album are fucking amazing, but it's the clever heavy metal harmonies that are all over here, and they're fucking beautiful. They are catchy as hell. In fact, Nate Garrett from Spirit Drift actually said this band sounds like corn-fed fucking Iron Maiden live. And he was right. Like, that is a spot-on fucking observation. They are fucking just solid songwriters, and everything is very just powerful. It's just driven by big riffy hooks, and again, these heavy metal harmonies that are all over this album, and really solid vocals. Like, the melodic hooks on this album, and actually all of their albums, are just very powerful and very engaging. Now, this album actually does get like pretty heavy in sections, a little bit chuggier, like songs like Frostlord, Forged in Fire, and Season the Witch have a little bit more oomph to them, a little bit more like chugginess, especially Forged in Fire, because that has a really awesome doomy breakdown on it. But you also have like straightforward heavy metal bangers like The Huntress, which is like the sword covering Angel Witch. It's fucking great. All the songs in here are really catchy. I do have some issues with the production, namely the drums. For as organic of a sound as I think this band has in terms of just like, having that old school heavy metal flair or like a stoner metal sort of sound, the drums sound oddly compressed, but that is about it as far as like complaints on here. Everything about this album I think is really solid. The hooks are fucking plentiful, the riff work is great, the melodies are infectious, the album cover is awesome, which I'm reasonably sure that is a reference to American Werewolf in London, which is quite possibly my favorite werewolf movie. So yeah, you're kind of winning on all fronts there. If you have not checked out this band for whatever reason, I strongly recommend just checking out all their albums. They only have 3 at this point. They're all really fucking good. In terms of recommending a release, this one would do, but honestly the other 2 are great too. Just check out Wolftooth. Why not? It's a fucking awesome stoner metal band with great heavy metal licks that sounds great on paper, and it's great on the albums. So yeah, check them out. They're fucking awesome. All right, we have a pair here from Wake. We have their second album, False, and their 4th album, Misery Rites. Now, this band has definitely changed their sound around quite substantially from these albums. So at this point, I would call them more like grindcore, death grind, crust. It's more in that realm. They're more atmospheric black metal or black and death metal at this point. And I really enjoy that sound, but I like these early albums a lot. These are just filthy and aggressive and just gnarly as hell, but they also represent a cool transition over time too. Their second album, False, is vicious as hell. This album isn't even 20 minutes long, and it is packed with blast beats, vicious guitars, lots of hardcore punk all over here. This is pretty much like the meeting of Nawsome and Converge. This is packed to the brim with D-beats, blast beats. You do get some cool groovy moments on Foster, some more death metal riffs on there too. And while they are known more for like atmosphere now, there's still some atmospheric touches on here, but it's a little bit more minimal. The Fixes In has some more like sludgy droning riffs and like pockets of blast beats on there, but Intrusion gets a little bit more distant. This album is more about like the straight ahead fucking violence. Like, it is just a maelstrom of anger and darkness, and I dig it. This is just a fucking great album. Now, Misery Rites is definitely that, but also shows a bit of a transition in their sound in terms of more like dissonant atmosphere and such. This is the album that came out before Devouring Ruin, which Devouring Ruin was definitely a hard shift to more like black and death metal. This still retains all the grind. In fact, I would say it grinds harder in some spots. The production on this one is a bit better. It's louder, like the guitars feel thick and chunky. there is definitely more of a focus on atmosphere as well as just being explosive and just destroying everything. There's definitely a bit more of a blackened edge to their music at this point. Like, that definitely becomes way more prominent in the following 2 releases, but this is where it really starts to creep in. The vocals are much deeper this time. They're more like low roars versus high screams. And I will say that this loses a bit of the crusty elements in favor of like more distant riffs. Mainly in the songs Paradigm Lost and Exile, you just notice that the atmosphere is a fuck ton darker. Like, isn't always about being angry. This is just also being about dark and moody. But it's the last track, Burial Ground, where that pretty much sounds like the big shift that they make with the next album. It's longer, it's much moodier, it's a fucking bruiser of a track. The atmosphere is very just dark, chaotic, feels absolutely fucking miserable. And it also feels more like a black metal song. Like, the black metal influence is definitely way more peaked on there versus other songs in here, which, you know, you still have your grindy fucking blasters like Rumination, which is just fucking disgusting. But a lot of this, you hear the big shift in style towards, you know, more atmospheric stuff. And honestly, this is great. This is a great balance of, well, what they did in the past and what they do now. And as far as what I've listened to by this band, this one might be my favorite from them. I don't know. I still got to listen to a couple more albums by them, but I like this stuff. Like, I liked the new Wake album. I thought it was really good, but this is the stuff that I jammed online and I just hadn't owned until right now that got me into the band. And when they made their kind of hard shift to what they do now, I don't know, like, I kind of missed this, but at the same time, I like what they're doing now, so yeah, I can't really make many complaints. But yeah, if you have never jammed the early stuff from this band, I strongly recommend it if you're a fan of grindcore, crust, hardcore, just hyper violent, fast music, but also like a little bit of atmosphere too. Like, it's very little in here, much more prominent in here. Just check out both these albums, check out this band in general, they're fucking awesome, and yeah, just check them out, that's the main thing. Alright, we have yet another pair here, except this time it's from Zao. Longtime fucking metalcore act, Christian metalcore. Honestly, the kind of Christian metalcore that I can get into, because generally their themes are a lot darker and their music is actually a lot darker too. One of my main complaints about Christian metalcore, especially like in the mid-2000s, it kind of just felt like Bible camp with breakdowns, but these guys actually went deeper with the lyrics and their themes and explored a lot of like darker territory, and I think that led to some more creative music. Like, I would say this band is kind of comparable to Norma Jean, except way more visceral, way more abrasive, especially in terms of like their riff writing. So we have their 11th album, The Well-Intentioned Virus, and their 12th album and most recent one, The Crimson Corridor. And I apparently have been sleeping on Zao for a while because I think these are 2 of their strongest albums here recently. Both of these albums see them exploring their sound kind of outside of metalcore, incorporating elements of post-metal, sludge metal, really solid songwriting on here. I think the riff work, lots of variety, lots of emotion behind it. I mean, you still have like the token Zao sound. Dan's vocals are very distinct in metalcore, that sort of static, shrill scream. But there's also a lot of cool, clean vocals as well. This album, I would say, is possibly the more raw of the 2, but I dig it. Like, the overall vibe on here is very dark and very sinister. I believe the whole themes behind it were about Christianity possibly being intentioned as something nice, something pleasant, but people twisting it and distorting it and using it for, well, justification for evil deeds. There's definitely a rich history of that in Christianity. But the songwriting here, I think, is excellent. The riff work, again, pulling from different camps, lots of variety. You have like thrashy chugs, of course, your metalcore breakdowns, but lots of atmosphere. Like songs like Apocalypse has almost a more Deftones-like quality with the clean vocals on it. Forgive me if I get the songs wrong, because again, another band that didn't put the track list on the back, but I believe the song Xenophobe on here was also very haunting, but also had some real like muscular riffs to it, like kind of like a beefier version of Norma Jean. And even the song Haunting squeezes in some like death metal tremolos on there. This is a very heavy but very catchy album. I like the peaks and valleys in it. There's a lot of dynamics to the songwriting. There's even some sludge metal riffs on here with like really good kind of southern tinged riffs to it. The production here is pretty decent. It's a little on the compressed side. It kind of reminds me a lot of like Will Putney's sort of production, like, you know, Fit for an Autopsy and such. But overall, it sounds good. The guitars are nice and fucking beefy. Now this one, I think, is an even bigger step forward. The opening track on here, Into the Jaws of Dread, so they put the track titles in this one. That song opens like Cult of Luna. It's a flat-out post-metal instrumental. It's very haunting, very dark. It's a good slow build, but when you get into the next track, Ship of Theseus, man, dude, that just sort of takes off into like syncopated chugs. You know, pretty much like all the metalcore chops you want with like a sort of sludgy tinge to it. But it's the post-metal elements on this album that I think really make this stand out. There's more slower atmospheric songs that build into like giant crescendos and like their token heavier sections. When you have that cool build, it makes those breakdowns, which pop up all over here, feel that much more impactful. Like there's a welling up of emotion. It has a dark and ominous sound to it overall too, which I really fucking dug. The clean vocals in here are a little bit more sparing, but I think they're used just as effectively. But overall, like the big thing in here I like is the song building. Like they're, again, employing a lot of post-metal tropes to sort of, you know, again, well up a lot of emotion and kind of come in with these giant crescendos. And it's just fucking amazing. Like, honestly, this might be one of my favorite Zao albums I've listened to, and I own a fair amount. In fact, I think I'm only missing maybe one or two. Both of these albums are absolutely awesome. I think the 10-minute closer on here is one of the best pieces of work they've done, The Web. Absolutely amazing song. But yeah, both of these are absolutely awesome. And I'm kind of picky when it comes down to metalcore in general, but like I am all for this sort of experimentation and broadening of their sound. Both of these are fantastic. I recommend both if you're, again, a fan of sludge metal and post metal. I think you're going to find a lot of stuff in here mixed amongst the breakdowns and shrieks and all the heaviness that they are known for. These are both excellent albums. Strongly recommend them. I'm going to have to figure out what I'm missing in terms of discography, because as far as metalcore goes, I think these guys actually have, you know, something different to bring to the table at least. But yeah, check them both out. They're both excellent. All right, yet another pair here, this time from Dutch death metal act Maceration. This is their debut album from 1992, A Serenade of Agony, and this is their second album from 2022, It Never Ends. So another band with a giant break in between albums, and actually, yeah, 30 years once again. Now, I had heard about this band courtesy of Thrash Maniac bringing him up in a review and was like, oh, wow, it sounds really cool. And I actually decided, why not just get both? So I did. And these albums are both pretty different. First off, this band, at least at this point, when their first album was fronted by Dan Swano, going by another one of his interesting pen names. I think it was Disra or something like that. I can't quite remember. But he was on vocals and keyboards on this. And this is just flat out old school death metal, bit of a thrashy bite to it. It definitely has like a more European flavor, especially with the keyboards, especially like, you know, piano sections on here, which Dan does a great job in there. And I love his vocals on here. He has a great harsh but intelligible style. They sound powerful as hell. The riff work on here is really solid, but the guitar tone in here is kind of raw and kind of thin. Like it has a very squawky sound to it. And I don't know, I just think with a better guitar tone, this probably would have stood out a little bit more. I think the songs are really well done, very dynamic, lots of great riffs again, but again, like production was definitely kind of rough. But despite like the production issues, even though this is a remaster, it does sound really good. Like lots of stuff that is very similar to Morbid Angel, Death, but again with like a bit of a European flavor, so like a bit of like Pestilence, or I would even say like some early melodic death metal like At the Gates too. And there's a fair amount of thrash metal in here, like the title track, The Watcher, The Mind Rampant, I think is an absolutely thrashy bruiser of a song. Now this has a fair amount of bonus tracks and they come from their demo years, and well, the demos are really rough sounding. Like, you know, pretty much I don't know if there was much they could do to actually salvage them as far as a remaster, but I think they did the best they could. The coolest part of it is the covers they do. They do a fair amount of covers of Obituary from Slowly We Rot, and Dan does a great job with doing the John Tardy vocals. Like the songs are spot on. The production, very rough once again, but they were fun to listen to. But the production is a lot to get through. Like the guitars can be very squawky, very gainy. Sometimes the vocals are in inconsistent spots in the mix, like sometimes just pushed back to the point where it's just an indistinct rumbling in the background, or sometimes just super muffled altogether where I actually had to turn it up to hear like anything. But overall, like this debut album, really solid. Now this new one is quite a bit different. I think this one takes more cues from bands like Bloodbath. Like, there has more of that Stockholm sound to it. Like, it definitely has more of an HM2 sort of like buzzsaw sizzle to it. Naturally, I fucking love that shit. But very solid songwriting. I like the added aggression to it. It still has all the melody and hooks. It kind of loses a bit of the thrashiness in favor of just more of a straightforward death metal sound. But man, these songs fucking whoop ass. Now, Dan Swano did the production on this one. He didn't do the production on this one. And I don't know if he's on the vocals on this one. It says someone else is listed, but, you know, Dan Swano likes to use a lot of pen names, but it might be someone different. Either way, the vocals are really solid on here. The song Engulfed in Agony has some absolutely massive triplet chugs, like one of the heaviest tracks on here. But this balances out brutality and melody really well. So, I mean, yeah, it's, again, kind of like Bloodbath. Very enjoyable, well-rounded death metal album. I dig this. Very different between these two, but both of them really good in their own ways. This was my first exposure to this band, and, well, I mean, I pretty much got to listen to everything they put out. So, yeah, I really enjoyed this. This is really good. Yeah, the demos in here are definitely a bit rough, but both albums as a whole are solid and very different from one another. Brutal as hell with solid fucking hooks. What more could you fucking want from death metal? Yeah, just check them out. They're both excellent. Chad Pile, God's Country. So the debut album from this Oklahoma-based sludge/noise metal act. I saw this on a lot of year-end lists, and I was very curious to check this out, and holy shit, this album is a lot to fucking take in. First off, as soon as I saw the title of the album, God's Country, I was instantly reminded that that is what people from the east side of Toledo call the east side of Toledo. And believe me, God has forgotten about that side of Toledo for a long time. If there wasn't a river separating the rest of Toledo from the east side, it would probably be a fucking minefield. Like, it's fucking rough over there. But seriously, I don't know if I was like full on prepared for this, because this is just a wild, dark, fierce, disturbing album. Lots of like Melvins-like sludginess, or, you know, bands like I would say I Hate God, or even like 16, stuff like that, but wrapped in this very chaotic, almost distressed package. The vocals on here are kind of like insane and very unhinged. Like, they feel very personal and very dark, especially the song Why, which Why pretty much repeats the same line about people living on the street. Like, why are there people living on the street when we can afford to house and feed them? And I totally agree with it. But it's the delivery. It sounds, again, very disturbing, very emotional. It kind of reminded me of like David Byrne doing his, you know, ranty vocals in Once in a Lifetime, which is an amazing fucking song, but it's also very dark. This sounds like that same rant, except, you know, fortified in meth. He gets increasingly more disturbed as the song goes on, as the song gets heavier and sludgier. And man, do these guitars have a fierce, sludgy backbone. They are fucking filthy, like low-end disgustingness. Honestly, at points I was reminded of Korn's Life is Peachy, to the point where they, again, they're like just super muddy and filthy sounding. But it works with the vibe of the music, which the vibe is, man, like distressed. Like, this is kind of a haunting listen, to be honest. In between all the heavier tracks with their giant sludgy breakdowns, you have like more introspective, soft, kind of depressive tracks like Pamela or Anywhere, which, I don't know, it feels like the Melvins covering Joy Division. Like, it's way more subdued, but again, there's like this thickness to it that's just sort of disgusting, but also very sad. But it's when you get down to the end of the album, I Don't Care If I Burn is this sort of like dark, like spoken word song. Like, it's kind of hard to describe. Musically, there really isn't much there. Like, it's the sound of things being dragged in the dirt, I think. I don't know, like, it's very unsettling. But what's more unsettling are the vocals, where he's singing a tune about dying, I think. Like, it's really just creepy, but it's done in such a fashion where it's like intended to sound like, you know, kind of whimsical. I don't know, it's just a very dark and disturbing song. Like, it's the musical equivalent of a fucking snuff film, I feel like. But the last track, Grimace Smoking Weed JPEG, which is sort of an odd title for a song, but that's an odd band. That is an absolutely crushing song that spirals into just haunting, disturbing noise. This album is awesome, but it's also kind of like a difficult listen. But honestly, I'm very intrigued by it. Like, it really drew me in. This is a weird album. I don't know. Like, I don't know if this would have made my year-end list. I've only listened to it twice, but both times I was just kind of like, man, this sort of filth doesn't wash off, does it? I like it, but again, there's parts of it that are just kind of like disturbing in general. But I recommend checking this out. This is quite the fucking listen. I can see why it made some year-end lists, because honestly, I don't think I heard anything quite like this all last year. So it stands out for its uniqueness too, but in terms of like going back to it, some things are easier to listen to than others on here. And yeah, I don't know. It's just a really interesting album. Check it out. It's fucking wild as hell. And yeah, I can totally see why this made a lot of year-end lists, because yeah, this is kind of on its own, like in its own weird, depressing island. So visit that island if you choose. It's a pretty fucked up island though, I'll be honest. But yeah, check it out. Deathsiege, Throne of Heresy. This is the debut full-length from this blackened death metal act. They're originally from Israel. Actually, they share a member with the band Venomous Skeleton, who's also from Israel. Really solid band. But I believe they relocated to Germany, which I guess I can see why Israel can be kind of a rough place to live, especially if you're a metal band that likes to talk about darker themes. I imagine that is semi-frowned upon there. But this is some absolutely ferocious blackened death metal. Very much in the vein of Angel Corpse and, I guess by extension, Perdition Temple. The riff work is chaotic, it's aggressive, there's a big thrashy backbone to it. And man, like the aggression is dimed on here. Every song in here pretty much just explodes, and it's just riff warfare. Lots of like squealy, thrashy solos. The drums on here are very loud, and I like the production on them. They sound like just extra aggressive. They do a good job of blending the overall sound of black metal and death metal together for like a uniform fucking hostile attack, but I like where they separate it out a little bit on Arbingers of Finality. That song pivots back and forth between like death metal chugs and like more cold black metal tremolos. I like that sort of flip between the two. This is a very fast-paced listen, tons of blast beats. I do like it when they break it down a little bit, like Drowned by Murderous Force. That's a good fucking song title. Nice, nasty, chunky breakdown on there. And the riff work on At the Ruins of Legacy, absolutely fantastic. Actually, one of the catchiest songs on here, but it still maintains that level of aggression that's all over here. Now, I would say that they can kind of hurt this a little bit because the moments of like groove on here are very minimal. Like this just is high octane from start to finish. I like to hear like a little bit more groove in maybe the next one if they do another one, because I think that would just settle it down a little bit, because this doesn't necessarily have a lot of peaks and valleys. It is mostly just a dimed aggression sort of thing. In terms of the valleys though, they're a little bit odd. The fifth track in is an odd interlude, satanic tyranny with chants and, you know, just atmosphere and such. And it feels like something that, all right, on like a vinyl pressing, that would be like, you know, what would kick off side 2. This is the fifth track on here, and it just kind of like hits the brakes in terms of the flow of the album, which again, those first 4 tracks are just fucking coming at you from all angles and beating the shit out of you. So that was kind of an odd moment of atmosphere. And then you have this long drawn out atmospheric end to Siege of Death, which up until that long drawn out part was a really fucking good song. If they had actually kind of like faded out maybe on that droning atmosphere, like I get like people want that chaotic sort of sound maybe at the end of a song to make it sound like you're descending into a pit of hell. It can be a bit much, and I think it goes on a little bit long, but overall, I really dug this. This is just furious as fuck. If you love Angel Corpse and Perdition Temple especially, I think you'd really dig this. There's a lot of thrashiness to it. The riff works really solid. This is just a vicious fucking album from start to finish. So if any of that sounds good to you, I recommend checking this one out. Occulsed, Parturition of Adulteration. This is a compilation of their 2 early demos and actually includes 1 new track. This is an Atlanta-based, let's say, dissonant, atmospheric death metal act. Very much along the same lines of like Incantation. It's very cavernous sounding, especially when it comes down to like the vocals, the guitars, and the drums. I mean, there's a lot of fucking reverb is what I'm getting at. We actually reviewed their last album, Crepitation of Phlegathon, when it came out, and Man, that was a fucking chaotic listen. Well, apparently their chaotic sound goes as far back to their demos. Now, the first demo, Cenotaph of Putridity, I think is, well, definitely raw. I mean, it's a death metal demo, but these guys like especially raw sound. It's very chaotic, lots of weird, like strange riff structure. Again, it's kind of similar to Incantation, except like, again, the riff structure I think is way more just chaotic. Like, there aren't a lot of like big riffy doomy breakdowns. There is just chaos, and for the most part it works. The vocals are very cavernous, again very layered, loads of reverb. Everything is kind of got a lot of reverb on there. Now when it came down to the second demo, 2020's Ceremonial Lifelessness, that one has decidedly different production. First off, the bass drum has more of a punch to it. In fact, I think the drums sound louder overall, but it's the guitars which just went full bore gainy. Like, there's not a lot of low end to them, and they're almost screeching noise at certain points. And with them being so prominent and out front, I think the vocals get buried, kinda. Like, some tracks, they are like very much in the background, like they're kind of an indistinct rumble, and then others, like you can hear them kind of come up a little bit. So I think the mix overall on that demo is really inconsistent. But mostly it comes down to the fact that the riffs themselves, I don't know, they don't really gel with me. Like, this has all the atmosphere. It sounds chaotic. It sounds fucking twisted as hell, but it doesn't stay with you. And that was kind of my issue on the second demo. But I have to say the newest track, Resiled Necronomcience, I think that's how you say that fiercely made up word, actually really fucking good. I kind of like it a little bit more than a good chunk of the stuff I heard on their full length. It's a little bit more riffy. It still has all the atmosphere, all the reverb. It's still cavernous and evil, but I think it's just better put together. And, you know, if anything, this compilation, you know, shows the growth of the band. And I think with any compilation, if you're going through like all the early demos to where they are currently, it's really cool to hear that sort of evolution over the course of one release. Overall, I'd say this is decent. Again, like the rough production on here kind of hurts the songs. Like, I think maybe like dialing back a bit of the reverb, you know, it might help, but I like the new song on here, so I'm definitely curious to hear what they put out next. So yeah, if you're a fan of Incantation or like Father Befouled and stuff like that, I'd say definitely check this band out. I check out their full length probably more so than this, but the new song on here I think is really good. So yeah, looking forward to hearing more from them in the future. It's filthy and disgusting, and yeah, just check it out. Spectral Wound, Infernal Decadence. This is the second album from this Canadian black metal act. I became a fan of them with their last album, Diabolical Thirst. That was actually a year ender for me. I fucking love that album. I thought it was excellent. A good balance of like more raw, kind of cavernous sounding black metal, but well produced and with lots of great songwriting dynamics. And this is pretty much a continuation of that, or that was a continuation of this rather, because it's backwards. This is very raw, but also very well produced. Lots of great melodies, great dynamics. It doesn't necessarily stay on like static blast beats all the time. There's really good breakdowns on here. Excellent guitar work. I love how melodic, but also how sinister and cold this sounds. It's also very moody too in terms of like how it shifts around. Like, you have more aggressive tracks like Black Satanic Glamour, which, yeah, that sounds absurdly black metal, and it is. It's just a fucking nasty song. It's fucking vicious as hell. But you also have more like somber, epic, atmospheric tracks like Slaughter of the Medusa and, oh, it's the one in French that I can't pronounce. La Nuit Freud de L'Oubli? I don't know. That's fucking really off. That was terrible, in fact. I apologize to all French-speaking nations for that one. But those songs feel more sorrowful, but also very epic. There's a lot of triumphant melodies on here. And the epicness is only magnified on the last track, Imperial Thanatosis, which, man, like that song, slowing it down, letting the melodies breathe so they're not being like suffocated by blast beats. Man, is that song just epic as hell. It's just massive. Of course, dark and fucking foreboding too, but it's just, I don't know, sort of like triumphantly evil. I love the vocal dynamics in here. I think they're really well done. The opening track, The Woods Which the Spirits Once So Loudly Howled, that's a mouthful, opens up with just these isolated, just blood-curdling screams, and it really just kind of sets off the album. Like, that's a good short intro right there. Just scream your guts out and then get right to it. But the vocals are very theatrical, like they're very dramatic, and I just kind of like that. It kind of ramps up all the energy. The only thing I would say that kind of hinders this one is the pacing. It does kind of get locked in on, like, you know, kind of a static sound. Like, there are some songs that kind of run into each other in terms of the overall sound, especially being like more tremolo and blast beat oriented. Honestly, as much as I liked Imperial Thanatosis as a closer, I think if that song was in the middle of the album, it would break it up a little bit better. But overall, I dug this. I think Diabolical Thirst is a stronger album overall, but this is still really good. I definitely want to check out their debut. If it's as good as these last two, then I'm fucking sold. So I'd say if you're a fan of bands like Craft and Dissection, and maybe like early Satyricon too, just definitely check this band out. They're fucking awesome, at least as far as I've listened, and 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So yeah, check them out. Atrocity Okkvlt III. This is the 12th album from this German, well, death metal, again, band. This band has gone kind of all over the place as far as genres, like more industrial stuff, more symphonic stuff, but they started off as a death metal act, and apparently they have come full circle and become a death metal act again, which, when I heard the new tracks from this, I was like, holy shit, they're death metal again. That hasn't been a thing for quite a while. Now, I only own their second album, Todessen Sucked. I think that's how you say that, maybe? I don't know. It doesn't suck, I know that much. It's just solid old school death metal, but the stuff that I heard after that, I pretty much largely ignored. I know that the frontman of this band did a lot of stuff with his wife, Liv, from Leaves' Eyes, which she's no longer in that band either. They got divorced, I believe, in 2016, and I think that's where Atrocity started shifting back to death metal. And, well, they're doing it really well, so I guess something good did come out of that divorce. It's very thrashy, hyper-aggressive death metal, kind of in the vein of like Deicide and I would say Vader. Blast beats aplenty, lots of great riffs, solid solos. There are still some like symphonic carryovers, like, you know, the opening track, Desecration of God, has a long lead-in of symphonic build-up and like chanting and atmosphere. It's cool, but it goes on a little long. And, you know, periodically the symphonic elements will pop up and, well, I mean, they kind of work, but sometimes you're like, yeah, I just kind of want to hear like the brutal stuff, because at least for me, I haven't heard them be brutal in fucking forever. Now, admittedly, I missed out on Occult 1 and 2. I don't know if they're just as good as this, but I do actually want to check them out now, because this is just a fucking furious album. I love the flat-out brutal chugging on Priest of Plague on here, but the melodic touches on Bleeding for Blasphemy and Faces from Beyond, a little bit of like Melodeath creeping in there, but like not the cheesy kind, like the early, like At the Gates, early In Flames sort of sound, with like some really good guitar harmonies and melodies that still make it sound dark and sinister. You get some grindy moments on Lycanthropia, and I have to say the last track, To Full Smarch, sure, almost kind of sounds like Fear Factory. It really lays on the syncopated chugs, and with those symphonic elements kind of sounding a little bit more industrial tinged, it sounds more like Fear Factory, but that isn't necessarily a knock, because I like Fear Factory. Overall, this was pretty good. You know, a couple of the, you know, more orchestral or symphonic elements get annoying. Like there's like a large amount of cackling and mumbling, and, you know, it's just, you know, a little bit too much in the atmosphere at times, especially when I feel like the whole thing about this album is just getting to the fucking brutality of it all. I do also think it's interesting that they packaged this with an instrumental version of the album. Not to say the instrumentation on here and any of the music is bad. It's just, you know, it's straightforward death metal. I don't necessarily know if you need an instrumental version of it, but it is solid. Anyway, I dug this. I thought this was really good, and I haven't said that about Atrocity in years, honestly. So I'm actually probably going to go back and check out the other Occult albums at least, and see if they're as good as this. But yeah, this is really fucking solid. So yeah, if you like Deicide and Vader and shit like that, I would definitely say check this one out. This is pretty fucking solid. And finally, we have Anatomia, Corporeal Punishment. This is their 4th album, came out in 2021. This is a Japanese death doom / just sludgy death metal act. Disgusting as hell. I fucking love how just murky and filthy their sound is. They don't necessarily put out a lot of full lengths. This is, again, only their 4th. They have like a billion fucking splits, though. Splits are definitely their thing. This is some disgusting shit. And I mean, if you could see the rest of this album cover, which I'm definitely not going to post because, yeah, it's pretty naughty. I mean, it definitely involves abuse of a corpse, both physically and sexually. The back cover is very revealing in terms of what's going on in the rest of it. And, well, I'm going to say that rigor mortis had to have set in for this person to be having as much fun as they are. Anyway, this is flat out disgusting. The production here is so thick and so murky sounding, but it fits perfectly. The vocals on here are absolutely inhuman. They're low, gurgled, drenched in reverb. It's like listening to a giant zombified ogre throw its guts up, and it works. It's absolutely fantastic because the music itself is that sludgy. The guitars are thick and murky. You have the big dynamic flips that you would hear in Autopsy, circa Mental Funeral, going from like blast beats to the slowest single chugs and drones possible. This is just disgusting. As much as I like the opener Dismember, the song Slime of Putrescence is, man, absolutely disgusting, but probably the most dynamic one on here. Starting off with, like, again, the single droning chords and just absolutely wretched fucking vocals. It builds up into, like, some really, I don't know, just like flat out kind of catchy moments on it. Like, it's just a really disgusting song, but the song construction I think is really excellent. But I think the big standout for me was Despaired Void, just because it was a little bit different. It's almost Funeral Doom. And yeah, they move slow anyway, but this actually has like Funeral Doom melodies to it and a funeral chant. Like the vocals move from the growls to like chanted vocals, and it's very haunting. Like, I really dug that one. I do have to say though, the last track on here is a little bit too noisy, dissonant, and it drones on forever. Like 20 minutes of forever of the same sort of like atonal, dissonant tremolo riff, and it kind of took me out of it. It just lays on the slow and horrifying vibe, kind of like Primitive Man, noisy soundscapes. And I like Primitive Man, but I like Anatomia when they're a little bit more geared towards that Autopsy side. So this song didn't really do much for me, and those are the only songs, you know, those 4 songs that I've brought up. So I like this one. I like Past Efforts a little bit more, but yeah, this is still grimy, filthy, disgusting death metal. It practically oozes out of your speakers when you play it. So, I mean, if you like shit like that, and I would say like early Hooded Menace too, definitely check this out. It's absolutely fucking gross. That's pretty much the standard for this band in general, I would say. So yeah, if you like any of that shit, definitely check them out. All right, that pretty much knocks out another one. I do want to make a brief mention of another one that Ben sent me. Coalesce, There's Nothing New Under the Sun. I actually already own this one, and it's a bunch of covers of Led Zeppelin. And, well, I might as well just tell you this will probably be in a giveaway, which, you know, eventually I'm going to get around to getting that together. But I got a lot of other stuff I'm working on right now, but eventually I'm going to get around to doing a giveaway. But, yeah, that is it for this one. Pretty fucking giant batch. And, yeah, in terms of stuff we're working on, I'm trying to figure out a day to get the Crowbar ranking together. And of course, like getting back to the States of Metal thing, I've already got the next one planned out. And it probably won't take me that long to get this one together because I'm pretty familiar with all the bands I'm going to bring up in it. But yeah, plenty of stuff coming up. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsofmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there, as well as our store. If you'd like to pick up one of our shirts, that is where you will find them. Denver Death Fest, we will be making more announcements about the lineups. There was a bit of a change in lineup, so we didn't make an announcement the week that I'm recording this. So, you know, there's going to be more announcements later, but we had to figure out what we were going to announce and what was all going to change there. Anyway, this takes place April 20th through April 22nd in Denver, Colorado, because that's where Denver is. And we're looking forward to seeing you guys there. I believe there are still tickets available, and there's a link down below if you would like to get some of your own. We're looking forward to seeing how badass this turns out. I'm pretty fucking stoked for it, and so are the rest of the guys, so hope to see you there. And of course, thank you all so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that shit. It means the fucking world to us. It's just amazing to see this fucking channel grow, and it's amazing to see all the positive feedback. I'm going to keep this one kind of short because I think my battery's about to die. So once again, thank you all so fucking much, and we will catch you later.